Good morning. This is your agent of change, DeCorey Davis with Crack the Mic podcast. And this week's segment is conflicts surrounding our youth. And according to, let me just say this here, according to Amy Morin, who's published an article in the Very Well Family publication, she stated the following, that advances in technology means today's teens are facing issues that no previous generation has ever seen. Now, to be clear, while some issues are not exactly new, electronic media has changed or amplified some of the struggles young people face today. Now, to join me on this conversation, I have a PhD in educational leadership from Capella University, who also has over 22 years in education. He also serves as a senior pastor. He also is a AP for DeKalb County Public School, which is one of Georgia's largest school districts. Also, back to the podcast again, is our very own Tamika Brown. She's with telehealth therapy and holistic lady counseling services. So if you ever know anyone who's in need of those services, please reach out to Tamika Brown. She's also the therapist for Palm Beach High School, Central High School, that is. Welcome to the broadcast, both of you.
Good morning. Thank you.
Okay, so without any hesitation, we know that social media, in fact, it is so, kids are so enamored, to say the least, with their electronic devices. Studies show that the average kid spends about 9 hours a day. And I think that's probably just being modest. But it's a problem. And in fact, it's such a huge problem that social media giants, Facebook, has a whistleblower who has been summoned to Congress. Her name is Frances Haugen. She's been summoned to come to Congress to speak on this here very issue. Should there be, and maybe Facebook is to be responsible for this here, should there be a divide between the content that's being shown to teenagers versus the content that's being shown to adults? Now, to just kind of go into it, I want to kind of go into the first question, and it's for the both of you. With the prevalence of digital communication, how has social media affected teens in the area of peer-to-peer relationships and how they view themselves overall? Who you want to take it first? Ladies first, Tamika?
No problem. I believe, one of the main issues that we're seeing is actually depression and anxiety are at an all-time high right now, not only with adults, but also with youth. And social media is playing a role in that because of really almost envy. A lot of people, when you're going through Instagram, right, when you're going through Facebook, people post the best of the best. People post a lot of actually, for lack of a better word, unreality, where it's the best of the best. They're putting their best foot forward. Sometimes it's, so contrived. However, for the teenager or adolescent that's viewing this, false sense of reality each and every day, depending on the life that they're actually leading at home and at school and, in their community overall, they, sometimes actually their depression worsens because they're looking at something that they can never attain, and their feelings of their self-esteem goes down, their self-worth is, there's a feeling of being devalued, there's a feeling of, I'm not good enough. And that is what and that is actually one of the main reasons why most people come into the counseling room to begin with. Many of us have been taught, unfortunately, not only by sometimes parents, sadly, sometimes our community, and just just the feelings that we gather in and of ourselves as we're navigating through life. A lot of people come into the counseling room because of that feeling that I am not good enough. And unfortunately, I do believe that social media plays a great role in that. And it's something that I do believe should be discussed, just like we're discussing right now. And we need to figure out, how can we help, I think, parents to equip their children? How can we help parents to feel equipped themselves? Because, oftentimes it's very difficult to give what you didn't receive. And so you have parents who feel inadequate. You have parents who also have low self-esteem, depression, anxiety, and they're trying to navigate life in adulthood. And they also now have children that they're raising who are coming up with those same feelings, if not worse. So I believe, long story short, I do believe that social media plays a role, and we've got to figure out how to tackle it. But I do believe, for the most part, everything starts at home. Everything starts at home.
Absolutely. I echo that sentiment. Dr. Kenyatta Arnett, you want to go ahead and weigh in on the question? Do you need me to repeat it, or do you have it?
No, I'm good. I have the question in front of me. Social media is definitely a problem. And one of the greatest problems that we find, school was intended, one of the main facets of education, of public education, is social interaction, and developing those social skills that we need to learn, so we can interact with people in healthy ways and have healthy relationships. Social media has taken that away. Students are not interacting the way that they used to. There used to be outside time. There was playtime. Now we have game time. We're chatting through our devices and not speaking to people. So learning how to communicate with people, that skill has been taken away because of our reliance on social media. As was stated, we become who we think other people want us to be on social media. We come up with these facades, and then what I see every day, students don't know how to express themselves verbally. You can ask a question and they can't articulate what is really going on, but they can text it. Or you're asking them to write a paragraph about how they feel. They're writing the same way they text, using broken words, fragments of words. And so our communication skills have really diminished because of the overwhelming reliance on social media.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And kids don't know how to react to each other. They don't know how to communicate. If they have a problem, they don't know how to talk it out. We don't know how to go stand in the front yard and just talk out what happened. Now we text it and we blast it to everybody, because now where it may have been a conversation between you and I, now with social media, it is a conversation between you and I and everybody that is attached to you and I on social media, and then some. And so our problems are magnified. Their issues are magnified because of social media. They Instagram it to all their followers, and then there's the big test and trial to see who gets more followers. We're in a race to see who gets more followers, and not realizing your digital footprint spreads your business to all those people attached to you, and then all the people that are attached to them in your footprint. And so it's really exaggerated the situations that we're in, and students don't know how to navigate their way. I don't think they know how to backpedal their way out of it now.
And that is so true. That is so true, Dr. Arnett. I want to piggyback off of something Tamika said real quick, and because what we're doing is we have created a society where almost, and me being a high school teacher at one point here in Miami-Dade County, I would often tease the guys. I say, listen, you guys are all cut from the same cloth. It's like almost an identical when it comes to personalities. They're all identical. I say you guys all pretty much got the same stand, the same shoes, the same this here, everyone, because what we have allowed a small still frame that is, and like Tamika said, people will put their best foot forward. So you're actually envying something that's not really a reality. You're looking at a person who may have taken maybe 50 pictures from 50 different angles just to get that one good shot.
Right.
To post on social media so that it can impress the people. Now, something you also said that kind of got me to, with respect to social media gangsters, I call them Facebook gangsters and Instagram gangsters. But watch this here. According to the National Center for Education Statistics, about 20% of teens in the US experienced bullying in 2017. One of the explanations the research has cited for this is the rise of social media use by teens. In fact, cyberbullying, in my view, has replaced bullying as the common type of harassment that teens experience. Now, I want to ask this question, and we're going to go to the next question. I want to ask you and Tamika this here both, and you can take it first and she can go second. But do you, Dr. Arnett, do you feel that social media has exacerbated teen violence?
Oh, most definitely. As I was just saying in my previous statement, because when there's a situation, for example, in most schools now, they have a cell phone or some kind of electronic device policy.
Right.
And to try and curb the issue. In our school district, we have a no bullying policy, and schools are no place for hate, and so we discourage cyberbullying is one of our main things. So every student has to do some lessons on digital citizenship because we want to teach them about the impacts of using technology. The problem has been exacerbated because now when there's a situation at my school, students have in their hand a cell phone that they can record the situation, and they're going live on different social media platforms. So it's not just Facebook. In fact, if you ask the kids are going to tell you, we don't use no Facebook. Facebook's for old people. Facebook's for old people. My mom and all her high school classmates, they get together on Facebook. So they're not even using Facebook. They're using so many other different platforms now. And they're streaming situations live to the world.
Absolutely.
And so the problem is so much larger now because everybody is now witnessing what's going on in what should have been a small local situation that could have been handled easily is now a national, it's globally seen and globally known now because the kids are streaming live. And so if you have an altercation in a hallway or a situation in a classroom, you have probably at least 10 kids in that classroom who are going to hold up their phones and start recording from different angles.
Absolutely.
And then everybody's going live with the situation. And so problems get so magnified because there are so many more people involved in the situation. I always joke with my students and say, I can talk about, and I was telling myself, back in the olden days, this is how we handled stuff, and it was, you had an issue, you went to the people that you had an issue with, you and your 2 or 3 little friends approached them and their 2 little friends, and however y'all handled it, talking, arguing, tussling it out, it was just a few of you, but now you are talking about the masses now witnessing what's happening. Another problem we have in the schools, and I'm sure you've witnessed it if you have an iPhone. One of the tricks I learned was when I'm in the school, I keep my phone on AirDrop. I turn the AirDrop on because Oh yeah, because the kids are airdropping stuff that they see, stuff that's happening in the school, and it goes to everybody's phone within proximity who has their airdrop on. So
Oh, wow.
instantaneously, if you have an iPhone, instantaneously you can share a picture. If somebody has on an outfit that you think is ugly, so that's where the harassment and bullying come in, because you can take a picture of someone who may not look the way you feel they should look.
Dr. Arnett, you're breaking up.
Oh, I'm sorry about that. Yeah, you can take a picture of someone who may not look the way you want, and you can airdrop that picture to everybody in the entire high school all in a millisecond. And so people are easily bullied because technology makes it possible for it to happen. But I can't say it's just the technology people's fault. I honestly can't say it's technology people's fault. I have to say I think it was Tamika was just saying, stuff starts at home. Parents have to be more involved.
Right. And you know what? You will find it quite amusing, to say the least, because, when we look at this situation, I believe it was at the school out in Texas, one of the schools that were out in Texas, and the kid who actually had the school at a standstill for the entire day. And what happened, and later once the family came out and they talked about the situation, and they talked about bullying being the chief reason why that kid, well, this is what the parents are saying. They said that he got tired of being bullied. Now, in my view, two wrongs don't make a right. There's always, and this is what I want to say here, if you are being a victim of cyberbullying or bullying in itself, please contact your resource officer in your school or your administrator. Do not take matters into your own hand. Now, in this song, which was the theme song for the story for this week, Kanye West and Watch the Throne album, he said every kid in the shop class had a tool. And I understood very well the hyperbole that was used in that song. Because, kids, this generation here, gun violence is at an all-time high. Who would have known that kid would have had a gun that had a gun on him that day, when that day he was actually being bullied, and he actually put a whole entire school at a standstill. Now, fortunately, I'm a community activist and I'm heavily in the community, and I can tell you countless times where I've actually walked around or being in the neighborhood and actually saw kids who I personally taught engaged in felonious capers and who had illegal firearms. And so it's not something that we can sit back here and be in denial about, because it happens. It just happened a few weeks ago in the school out in Texas. So Tamika, you want to go ahead and share your sentiment on the question, do you feel that social media has exacerbated teen violence?
To say exacerbated, I'm not 100% sure about exacerbate. I think there is violence, period, and it runs the gamut and it goes across all socioeconomic lines. And I think a lot of people, there is something where human nature people tend to like certain depictions, and unfortunately violence is one of them. And so I wouldn't say that it's exacerbated. I think it is just something that unfortunately has become almost the norm in our culture. And if we're not seeing something that is graphic, if we're not seeing something that jars the mind, if it doesn't do something to the soul, it's like, let me just keep going and scrolling. But I do believe that it's something that does need to be addressed, and we do need to curtail certain viewings. And I think that, that's exactly what Facebook should be doing. Of course, there are certain things that slip through the cracks. There's also so many other, the internet is just laced with so many sites and so many, graphic images and depictions. And I think a lot of people they're not filtering what they need to, really be viewing. And then, of course, for their parents, the parents are a lot of times using these devices, using these games and just, social media in general to, in a sense, raise their children. So I'm not sure if it's an exacerbation or it's just really honestly become part of our norm and commonplace within the culture that we need to just simply address and take a step back and figure out how we can begin to put certain filters and limitations in place. But again, I think my overarching point, I think that I'm finding right now is just that it does start at the home, period.
Yeah,
Yes.
I definitely echo that sentiment. All right, now based on the 2017 Youth Risk Behavior Surveillance data, 39.5% of high school students reported being sexually active. Fortunately now, the teen birth rate has declined over the past decade as well. Yet births to teens ages 15 to 19 accounted for 5% of all births in 2017. The decline in pregnancy doesn't necessarily mean teens aren't using protection. However, of the 20 million new sexually transmitted diseases each year, more than half were among young people between ages 15 and 24. Yeah, I know that's quite shocking. Now, I want to ask the two of you this question. What role does social media play in both the fanatization and glorification of sex, in your view? Either one can go first. You, Tamika, or Dr. Arnett. Doesn't matter.
I'll jump in first. I wouldn't say it's just social media that encourages the fantasization. It's not just so, it's music. I mean, TV, sex is everywhere. This generation has grown up with sex right in front of them and nothing is hidden.
Right.
I can remember when I was younger and I was the youth. There were certain things you did not see on television. There were certain things you were not going to hear on television.
Absolutely.
I think
Absolutely.
I was good and grown when I figured out how Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz had children on I Love Lucy, and they slept in two separate beds.
We're showing our age, doctor.
You know what I'm saying?
Right.
You never saw on the Cosby Show, you saw them in the same bed, but it only went to a certain limit. There were certain things we just did not see, but now sex is in the lyrics to the music that they listen to.
Right.
It's in every television program. It's in the cartoons that they watch. It's on our ads to sell products. Sex is a part of the media marketing. It's just there. So it's just around them. So I wouldn't say it's just social media. Social media just plays the ads and puts it in the palm of their hand, but it's everywhere. I mean, parents don't even.
At some point, should social media, and this is why I take my hat off to Frances Hoggins, who was the whistleblower who worked with with Facebook for years, and she alerted the Congress and was summoned and testified against how Facebook purposely hid information that they knew was damaging. There should have always, in my view, and I don't know if I guess this can be a two-part question. In my view, I think there should be a Facebook or Instagram or whatever social media, Twitter. I think there should be an outlet for adults strictly and strictly for teenagers.
Now, I agree with that. But I definitely agree with that. But I still go back to what Tamika said in the beginning, that parents have to be responsible because there are parent filters that you can put on these devices, but parents aren't using those filters. Uh, and I know I have relatives who put those filters on their children's phones where they can only speak to certain people at a certain time. And so parents have to be more involved in social media. I think it's unfair to expect Facebook and any other social media platform to be responsible for what your child takes in. As a parent, we have to be responsible for what they're seeing, what they're doing, and be involved in their lives and not just give them social media and these applications and devices to babysit them and to keep them occupied and entertained so they don't bother us.
Okay. Go ahead and weigh in on it. What role does social media play in both the fanatization and glorification of sex in your view, Tamika? It's a two-part question. And the second part of the question would be, do you feel the need for Facebook to have a divide between the platforms that adults have access to and that of teenagers, that the one that teenagers should have access to?
Got you. Well, I honestly just piggyback on what Dr. Arnett said. I agree with him wholeheartedly. And at the end of the day, I believe, parents, like the Bible says, parents provoke not your children to wrath. And in order for those children to, be raised in the proper way, they have to be raised in the admonition of the Lord. They have to be raised with proper principles, right morals, guidance. And as Dr. Arnett said, a lot of parents, unfortunately, use these devices to raise their children. The devices become babysitters for these children, and there is no discretion, there's no guidance, there's no even conversation. Even if you're going to let your children, watch these things freely and partake in certain video games, and just, receive a lot of graphic content. Okay, where's the conversation now with those children to say, hey, okay, when you watch that, how did you feel? What do you think about this? Let's have the talk about sex. Let's have the talk about, suicide or violence or whatever the depictions are that they're receiving. So the conversation really, is not being had. I don't believe that Facebook, Instagram, or any app or social media platform can honestly fully, even if there was a divide on the platforms, at the end of the day, with technology ever burgeoning and it's continuously, moving at such a high rate of speed, at some point there would be a breach. At some point, kids especially would be able to, right? They'd be able to figure out, okay, how do I get on, on mommy's platform or whatever to be able to see whatever they wanted to see. So I just don't think that is the solution. Could it possibly be a buffer? Yes, it would to some degree, but I don't think it is all encompassing, and therefore it just, to me, would not be a permanent resolve, to this issue, period. Period.
Right. Well, we have to agree to disagree, but I definitely think that the social media giant should play a bigger role. I think in its business plan inception, in the beginning, you can't, of course, the damage is done and it's collateral. I mean, it's colossal rather, because as you see, teenagers, like you say, just information, how it's actually transmitted is almost instantaneously, as Dr. Arnett said. Things content that should not be on Facebook for a teenager to have to be exposed to should not be there when it's just strictly for an adult. And I think had there been a divide between an adult platform versus a teenage platform, I think that would have slowed down on a lot of the ratchetness or rambunctious teenagers that we would have, be it getting caught up in sexual activities before their times, or even drug use, which we're going to talk about right now, and just kind of go forward with it. So in 2017, about 6% of seniors in high school reported using marijuana daily. Wow. In fact, marijuana use exceeds cigarette use in teenagers nowadays. Many teenagers believe marijuana is less harmful now than in years past. This new perception, in my view, is partly attributed to the changing laws surrounding marijuana use, or the use of marijuana, I should say. Now, the question is for the two of you, Dr. Arnett and Mrs. Tamika Brown, what role has social media played in the increase of drug and alcohol in teens today?
Tamika, you want to go first?
Don't all answer at the same time.
Honestly, because I'm a techie person. And my biggest issue has always been that we continue to place blame on everyone else except for the ones who are supposed to be accountable for the children. It's like the parent who comes to the school and says, I didn't know my child was failing. Well, ma'am, I've sent you emails saying that your son plays on a cell phone all day. And this, I honestly had this happen. I had a student who had an IEP that said, remove distracting devices.
Oh, wow.
I said, ma'am, the distracting device is his cell phone, but you gave it to him. You sent him to school with his cell phone. You put the data plan on there. He don't need all the internet on his cell phone. He just needs to be able to call you if there's an emergency. So he doesn't need a data plan. He doesn't need unlimited data access. If his phone is for emergency purposes, he's playing games on his cell phone. But you want me to take his cell phone, but it's also his comfort device. It's contradictory. So at some point, we have to get back. Your parents were responsible for you, and they were accountable for you. So social media, yes, they have their role, but we also have to remember social media, it's a business. Their job is to make money. They're out there to make money. It is not their responsibility about the ethics of your child and about the morality of your child. They are in business to make money, like any other business. We don't worry about the food companies giving us stuff that's gonna kill us and make us fat, and hold them accountable. So holding social media responsible for all these things that parents, as Tamika said, should be having conversations with their children. You should be having conversations with your children and not rolling blunts with your children, not glorifying drug use with your children.
Wow.
Not partying with your children, but setting down boundaries for your children and allowing them to be children who evolve into adults and not let them be children who think they're adults.
Absolutely, absolutely. Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. And I chuckled a little bit because, I actually, in my experience, I do recall a kid actually stating that to me. And I, because I smelled the smell of marijuana as the kid walked in. And me being the quite inquisitive teacher I was at the time, I asked, I say, and I did it in the most polite way. I pulled him in and I say, hey, I smell reefer. And he said to me, what is reefer? He said, you smell loud, homie. And I said, well, loud, reefer, whatever, whatever word play you're using. I say, well, he says, my mom was smoking it.
Right.
And I'm thinking to myself, Dr. Arnett and Mrs. Brown, how in the world, because that's something foreign to me. That's something I've never, and I can honestly say this here, I don't know if it's because my mom, the house that I was raised in, she's very, very strict and very, very, very conservative with respect to how she handles certain situations around her kids. Right. It was something I would never could imagine. I couldn't fathom the ideal of a parent sitting there smoking around a school age teenager before dropping him off. To me,
and they don't care.
That is atrocious behavior, quite frankly.
I think too, there are also a lot of misconceptions just from I can't speak too much to the medical point of view, but just from the little bit that I know, coupled with, my mental health experience, a lot of people don't really realize the effects that come from marijuana use and drug use in and of itself. You are, especially for children, the brain is still expanding, the brain is still growing and developing until about 25, and now you're putting substances in your body that are directly affecting that development. They're affecting synapses. They're affecting all the neurons that need to send proper messages. And a lot of people don't recognize that they need to be educated on the use, on the medical effects, on the physical effects from marijuana and other drug uses, because it's definitely it's hindering the growth and development of these students, and they don't realize that you need cognition. You need to be able to make wise decisions. You need to be able to from just a practical standpoint, you need to be able to walk into any business and be able to apply for a job, take a drug test, and get that job.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Period. So a lot of, I think, parents have neglected, again, having that conversation and just educating themselves on the effects so that they're able to say, hey, listen, you're not, not 25, you're not grown yet, you're still under my roof, whatever it is. And this is actually doing great harm to your body. It's doing great harm to your mind. You may not, feel it today. You may not feel it tomorrow, but at some point it is going to catch up with you. And it can lead, honestly, to psychosis. It can lead to a whole plethora of mental health conditions, a whole plethora of physical conditions that, you may have to deal with at some point. Now, some people are fortunate where they may never, for them, face any great detriments, but you may not be so lucky. And so you have to be educated, you have to be careful, and you have to have that conversation.
Yeah. And that would assume that the parents are aware of those effects.
Well, here, and they'll say, listen, it's not like it's sweet. It's not like you're smoking Molly. There's a difference. But I would argue, and you just said something that was shocking. The effects of it can be quite long lasting and unimaginable that a lot of young folks don't really realize, because to me, are marijuana use. And we can say probably this conversation will be obsolete, because maybe within the next 5 years or so, just looking at the way our liberal folk who are in power, how the trend, the way it looked as though a lot of marijuana would be legalized. And that may be a thing of the past, but I'm not advocating for that. I'm a strict conservative. I'm against that. But let's talk about, continue the conversation about psychosis, because, some people may say, well, it's not as dangerous as it's not going to send me into, I'm not going to have a manic episode because I smoke a little pot. But listen, I have
telling your age, keep saying pot and reefer.
Well, okay, marijuana, loud, whatever they call it. Listen, let me say this here. I've actually witnessed this here. I promise you. And I was at a school, and some kids had consumed, it was a brownie or something like that, but it was laced with marijuana. And the kids had a manic episode. It was a drug-induced psychosis. The kids literally were walking and just sitting around and just falling out and laughing and just acting crazy, until one of the kids almost went into hallucination and almost started feeling as though he was having a heart attack. And that was something that alerted, and we had to alert the officials. But sometimes you look at it, the weed and the potency of it, and just how people are growing it today, it can actually be something that can kind of really offset the brain pattern. I'm no brain scientist, but I know that sometimes psychosis or drug-induced psychosis can happen as a direct cause to you consuming are you consuming a substance that your body was not ready for? It has happened.
We also have to remember that, I have relatives that are drug dealers. Yeah, so I'm just be honest. And so a lot of the weed that, that these kids are buying is not just pure weed, it's laced with something. In fact, I have a relative who just died of using some weed that was laced with fentanyl. So they're lacing it with something else to give them a higher high. And so those effects are what we're seeing when these kids are walking like zombies in the schools and on the street, because you don't know what they've smoked.
Right, absolutely.
You don't know what they don't even know what they've smoked.
Absolutely. It's
laced, and they have no idea, because they're not getting, it's not the purity, of the plant that they're receiving. So, and depending on their whoever is their pusher or whatever, their supplier, at the end of the day, that person could very well be lacing it with so many other things.
Yeah. Or they're doing the synthetic marijuana.
Right. Yeah.
Right. Synthetic marijuana. Yeah, because I guess assuming that it wouldn't show up in a drug test, and I don't know if that to be true. But hey, it makes sense. Doesn't make sense to me.
No, it gives a different kind of high.
Oh, it does. I didn't know. Okay. All right. Well, moving along. I want to. This is the last question I want to entertain, if we can, for a moment. The National Center for Educational Statistics reported that 69% of African Americans graduate, whereas 73% of Hispanics graduate and 86% of whites graduate. And when you look at the numbers, I think Dr. Arnett, you would be the best person to speak to this. I have my suspicions, or my reasons, or my explanations, I should say, why the disparities exist between the various population groups. Why is it, but just let me ask you as a professional, why is it that African Americans and Latinos, the numbers pale in comparison to our counterparts, white folks?
Well, we also have to remember textbooks were not written for minority audiences. Textbooks are written from a language that the average African American or Latinx student is not familiar with. That's one of the problems with the SAT. The language of those tests and the textbooks is not written for our groups, our students, our children. And so there's that disparity. Then you have issues with students in African American or communities of color, where they may not have access to the same resources.
Absolutely.
Students in a more affluent and more predominantly white community, they have better resources than students in a poorer neighborhood that, whereas, for example, look at this during this COVID pandemic. One of the problems we faced was they sent everybody home on March 13th. Everybody got sent home on March 13th. And they told kids on Monday, March 16th, get on your laptop and we're going to do school virtually. Well, everybody didn't have internet at home. Everybody didn't have no laptop. So guess who it affected? Those communities of color, those students who have single parent homes. Then they told the parent, well, come to the school and pick up a laptop. But if your mom is a single parent and she has to work, she's a frontline worker, she couldn't take off to come to the school to pick up a laptop. So you're already set back because you didn't have a laptop, you don't have internet at home. So we bought hotspots, but still the parent had to come to the school to come pick up the hotspot. But if you don't have a car, you're on public transportation, all these different, so many different variables. And so the system is not designed to really address all of the issues that impact communities of color at higher rates than more affluent or white populations. Our kids deal with things that they don't, you know.
Right.
And that's just the reality. And the school system is not, we're not addressing those issues. We're not.
Absolutely. So equity is something.
Equity is the word.
Equity is something that we do struggle with. And when I look at equity with respect to education, it's just like this here. And I'll put it quite simple. If you have a monkey, an alligator, and a bear, and you have them all, and you ask them all to climb a tree, okay? Fairness is this, or the inequity, the unfairness is this. The monkey is innately equipped with the physicality to act, or the physicality rather, I should say, with the makeup to actually climb the tree, whereas the alligator and the bear cannot. But you are expecting the same results to happen, and that to me is totally unfair. Wouldn't you say that's a fair assessment?
Yes. I mean, to anytime one of the models that, and you've probably seen it in some of in the classroom when you're doing professional development with the kids standing at the fence, and all the kids are different heights, but they all want to see over the fence.
I like that one as well. I have seen it. I like that.
You know, what is equity? Equity is not cutting the fence down. Equity is providing what each student needs to be able to see over the fence with equal opportunity. And so we're not doing that at all. When you have schools that clearly are in impoverished communities, yet they don't even have air conditioning.
Right.
You know, so you want me to learn, but I'm hot. You know,
exactly.
You want me to learn, and it's hot as, you know, it's hot as the dickens in this school, and you want me to learn, you know, or you want me to learn, and I don't have access to a laptop. Well, how am I going to get on the internet? Teacher's telling you to do some work, but I don't have this at home. Teacher says that's not my problem. Well, it has to be somebody's problem, you know, and so the school system, we have failed our communities in that area of equity. I think they've gotten it confused with equality and equity, and they're not the same.
Two different words, spelled totally different, mean totally different. Absolutely.
Yeah, giving everybody the same thing doesn't mean you're giving them what they need.
Absolutely. You want to weigh in, Tamika?
Yeah, I wanted to just say, ask Dr. Arnett, since he is in education, do you believe that we as a people, as far as our people are concerned, are we not like from a tribal or communal perspective, are we not funding or applying for proper funding? You know, for those impoverished schools, how do they get the AC? How do they get, you know, the funding and the things that they need for these students to really thrive?
The way it happens, property value determines how much schools are funded, believe it or not.
Oh, wow.
The property values, those property taxes in your local community are what fund the schools in that community. Hence the reason why you have your more affluent people, they're not going to live. Corey, you remember living in Atlanta. There were certain people that were going to live in the West End.
Oh, yeah.
Going to live in the West End. You know, because property values weren't that great in the West End. So wasn't that many property tax, so those schools look bad. But you go right there to Buckhead, which is still Fulton County, still part of the city of Atlanta, and the schools look better because property taxes and property values were much higher, so they got more funding based on property taxes and funding. And so then you also have to deal with the issue of voting, because we have been accustomed to not voting and not realizing that those local elections are probably more important than the presidential election, because the local elections, when you vote for the person that sits on your school board who represents your school zone, and if that person on your school board who represents your local school zone does not speak for you, they're just glad to have a position. They're smiling and doing picture ops, but they're not really fighting for your zone. That's a problem.
Absolutely.
That is a major problem. And I think that's what we have gone wrong the most, is because we're still fighting the conception of, I shouldn't vote, I don't need to vote because my vote don't count. But really, your vote does count, because you need to vote at them local elections to get the right people in your local government, because that's where your schools are funded mostly through your local government. That's what controls it. Your local school board, your local city council people. These are the people that speak for your school. And if they can drive by your school and see the windows busted out and window units still in a, because a school in 21st century with window units, something wrong.
Absolutely.
Everybody got central air. And everybody got central air. And you still got window units in classrooms. That's wrong.
Absolutely. Yes.
Or you still have lead. I was in a school recently where I was working in Baltimore. You couldn't even drink from the water fountains.
Wow.
We couldn't drink from the water fountains, so we had to get water dispensers to put in the hallways, because the school water pipes were lead-lined water pipes. And it's been like that since the school was built 70 plus years ago.
Oh, wow.
And the school board, they didn't come and renovate and change the water line. No, they put water coolers in the hallway.
Oh, wow.
That was their solution. Put water coolers in the hallway.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah. So when the water coolers run empty, then we didn't have water to drink in the school until the truck came to deliver more water bottles of water.
Wow. Wow.
You know what I'm saying? But the school that was less than maybe 5 miles away, that was in a more affluent community, same school district. Oh, their school had like a walk-in museum, an art gallery when you walked in. It really did. I walked in. I said, well,
I'm laughing, but I've seen it happen. Yes, it happened.
Yeah, we see it here in the Atlanta metro area all the time now. In fact, I had a conversation with a teacher just earlier today, the disparity between the north side of the school district versus the south side of the school district. Property value, funding is different, and the intensity of our efforts is different. So we have to vote. We have to be vocal and be at those school board meetings and make it known. Hey, look, my kids are there. You wouldn't send your kid there.
Absolutely.
My kid got to go there.
Absolutely.
And so it's just those simple things, just being vocal and present, I think is the challenge that we have, is making people more vocal and present.
Absolutely. Well, guess what, folks? We are out of time. I want to just thank Dr. Kenyatta Arnett, and he is the AP with DeKalb County Public School, which is one of Georgia's largest school districts in Georgia. And again, for Tamika Brown being with us. And folks, let me just send this just put this out there. If you know of any teenager or a person who may need counseling, who's feeling bad, you can always reach out to Tamika Brown with the telehealth therapy holistic lady counseling service. She is a therapist, counselor, and she also served for Palm Beach Central High School. So you have heard from the best of the best, the creme de la creme. And again, my name is DeCorey Davis. I'm your agent of change, and I want to thank you for tuning into Crack the Mic. Peace.